Hello everyone, and good evening to you all from Athens in Greece. My life changed in December 2015. All the apathy that had overtaken me in the years before surgery had disappeared, and for the first time ever, with fear and trepidation, I joined a patient support group on Facebook. I felt I was in a new world, that I'd landed on a new planet. Paraplanet, as I often call it, a land where everyone knows about the parathyroid and the suffering it can cause. I was totally overwhelmed. I realized that the sufferers faced the same problem the world over, the battle to be listened to, the battle to be treated with respect, the battle to find a knowledgeable doctor, and the list goes on. My passion was born. For almost 6 years, I've been immersed in the world of hyperparathyroid patients and have learned much from their experiences and from extensive research on the associated issues. Together with our dedicated admin team, we continue to help and support many people every single day. When I first started the group, there were certain things I wanted to set in place. I personally was always put off if I saw a site or a group asking for contributions or selling certain items with their logo. This is why we have very clear disclaimers about being totally independent and not having or wanting funds. The members of our admin team have been carefully chosen. We are united in our desire to help people with this insidious disease in any way we can, and we work well together. We live in different time zones, which means that nearly always someone is available to deal with any issues that may arise. What happens when someone has applied to join and is approved? We try to create a warm atmosphere so that newcomers immediately feel they are among friends. You can see an example of one of our welcome messages. Many members add some words of welcome too. The group has several different sources of information which can be confusing for new members. The roadmap, called Getting Started, is a simple and practical guide to help them find what they need. The files, for example, mainly contain links to research articles or other information deemed important. The topics group together members' posts on subjects of interest. For example, we have one called Voice and Vocal Cord Issues, another called Children with Parathyroid Issues, and many, many more. At first, we didn't have a set of rules, but we found they were necessary to help people understand what is or isn't permissible, and to justify removing unsuitable comments, links, or posts. In the early days, with only a handful of members, newcomers were often reluctant to post their stories. But now, after seeing the incredible interaction between members, newcomers usually rush to share their experiences and unburden themselves. Our wonderful members respond with empathy and support to help the member feel part of the parafamily. The members usually relate aspects of their personal experience, explaining, for example, how they dealt with certain symptoms, why they had to keep changing doctors, the difficulties of getting diagnosis, the guilt they felt about not being able to care for their families or homes as before, the problems associated with their professional life. New members often mention the relief they feel knowing they really have arrived in the right place, where they are understood and offered hope. This slide explains several reasons justifying the need for a support group. All are important, but one of the saddest things that we often see is that loved ones do not believe that the patient is truly suffering. Relationships and self-esteem are impacted. This is the curse of an invisible and little-known illness. We now move on to the kinds of support offered. This group has a wealth of information which has been built up over time and is continually growing. However, some members rarely read the articles available and rely on the interchange between the patients for help and advice. The patient's experiences are perhaps the most revealing source of all, since they contain things not found elsewhere. I think an outsider would be astonished to see the kind of deeply personal discussions that take place within the group. These discussions are taken very seriously by all concerned, since the behaviour and incidents described are a result of the horrific impact this disease can have on the mind as well as the body. Much more research needs to be carried out on this. I always feel the need to reassure the sufferer that it is the disease which causes them to act in this way, and the real person inside has not changed and will re-emerge following surgery. And when this does happen, it is a truly emotional moment for everyone. Members need to feel that the environment is safe in order to share personal information, which can include relationship issues, desperation, crisis of rage, addiction, abuse, violence, etc. Practical support of all kinds is available. A member only has to ask, and a multitude of suggestions will be forthcoming. Our one-page guides were created in response to a specific need for people joining the group with little or no knowledge of the disease and information about how to move forward. They cover a very basic description of the disease, tests and scans needed for diagnosis, criteria regarding choice of doctors, and a post-op checklist with information useful after discharge, which should be provided by the surgeon, but sadly often isn't. And despite this checklist being posted every single week, many members still turn to the group for advice and suggestions when they have problems. We always advise them to contact their surgeons or their endos, since we cannot offer them specific advice about the signs of tetany, and we tell them to rush to the ER if they have such symptoms. The absence of input from their doctors in the post-surgery period is of great concern. The recommended lists of surgeons and doctors are categorized geographically by country, state and town, and are very easy to use. Very often patients consult these lists to find good surgeons and doctors in their area to avoid having to travel. The lists are growing and are regularly updated. Now let's turn to the other side of the coin. Doctors can learn a lot from their patients by paying attention to the whole picture that the patient presents with, including all their symptoms. Unfortunately, many doctors in this field are stuck in the past with outdated guidelines, acknowledging a limited range of symptoms and uncomfortable with diagnoses of normocalcemic or normohormonal hyperparathyroidism. I would imagine that if doctors diligently followed the cases of some members, right from the days where they were struggling to get diagnosed, seeing how their lives were affected in so many ways, following their progress through surgery and recovery, and finally regaining normalcy, they would learn so much, and perhaps reflect on their approach to this disease. I hope that some of the topics covered in this webinar will cause some doctors to want to learn more about the disease. Diagnosis can be very challenging, to say the least. Now, how can doctors themselves try to raise awareness? Well, I believe you are in a privileged position. As doctors, you are respected, and people are more likely to pay attention to what you say. In addition, you probably have contacts, even in the media, who you can use to get publicity. And don't ignore the internet. Use it to share articles, videos, and interviews about hyperparathyroidism. I am certain that virtually all of you know many people in the medical community who, unbeknown to them, come into contact with patients who may have parathyroid issues. Just think of the possibilities here. If, for example, dentists, psychiatrists, gynecologists, to name but a few, could pick up on certain symptoms and suggest their patients get tested, I believe many cases would be detected at an earlier stage. Here I have to explain why our list is so long. We have the following criteria for what we believe should be considered a symptom of hyperparathyroidism. If a symptom improves or disappears following curative surgery, it should be considered a symptom. I know many of you will not agree with this, but please study this list carefully. All of these symptoms are mentioned frequently. Here there are just a couple of comments posted by patients, but they are typical of what we hear. The way patients are not believed when they relate what they're going through. The way some doctors don't seem to know enough to be able to help the patient. And the way many members become determined to raise awareness. This slide is about the role of the doctor in the group. He or she should listen carefully to what the members have to say and offer guidance where appropriate, always maintaining a discreet presence. Doctors who have joined the group begin to learn things that they don't usually hear from patients during consultations. They start appreciating the disease from the patient's point of view. I cannot emphasize enough how important this is. This discreet presence is vital because nothing must occur to threaten the integrity of the group. And, as is mentioned, there are many people in the group who have had bad experiences with doctors. This may be hard for you to believe, but unfortunately, it is true. I think this slide is my favorite. It's about where we were, where we are now, and offers hope for the future. At the beginning of all this, when I was really despondent because things were tough and we didn't have many members, a very dear friend of mine encouraged me, saying, "Today you are planting the seeds, and one day they will bloom." And she was right. Thank you for the invitation to talk to you this evening. I'm sure this webinar will be a huge success. On a final note, I want to take you back to how it all started. Eureka! In the year 1852, a rhino died in London Zoo. The search for a secret gland commenced, but no one realised what this meant. In the neck, 4 glands were found. "Eureka!" shouted those around. But it took some years to understand that calcium is regulated by these glands.